Hey guys, Effie here. Today I'm going to show you how I made this card using our Coming Up Poinsettias stamp set. Now this is a card that I made during an Instagram live. I just recorded at the same time, so I finally got around to editing this video to post on YouTube. So I'm going to start off by double stamping this beautiful poinsettia cluster onto some watercolor paper using our Noir Dye black ink. Since our Noir ink is archival, you can use it when you're watercoloring. So I will be watercoloring using Ken Oliver color bursts. I'll be doing some loose watercoloring. For my poinsettia petals, I'm going to use a combination of Indigo and Orchid color bursts. And then for the leaves, I'll use a combination of sap green and turquoise. The turquoise is a little darker, so I'll be using that as a shaded element later on. Now I'm doing some wet in wet watercoloring, and I started off by wetting my poinsettia blooms first with some clean water, and then I started dropping in a little bit of indigo color burst. After I blended that indigo out just a little bit, I dropped in bits of orchid color burst to add a little bit of interest with that second shade of color. Now I am watercoloring outside the lines. I did mention that this is loose and messy watercoloring. So I don't really care that the color is going outside the lines. And since we just stamped these images with black ink, there's no embossing, so the paint and the water is going to get outside the lines, but that's okay because the messy watercoloring, that's the look that we're going for today. For my painting, I just want to make sure that I have the two shades of color in my poinsettia petals, that deep indigo and that orchid. So I'm just really just doing some loose watercoloring, dropping in a little bit of color and making sure that they blend in the petal areas. Now, after I finish with my base layer of painting for my first cluster, I'm going to repeat the process for that second cluster in the other corner of my panel. Now I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to wet the area first with clean water, and then I'll take a second fine tip brush, and for using this fine tip brush, I'm going to dip it into my color burst powders, and I'm going to just drop in color into that already wet area of the blooms. And I'm going to repeat the process using indigo and orchid watercolor, or rather color burst powders. So after I put down that first base layer of color, I did end up going back to add more of the indigo to certain parts of my petal to add that deeper shading for additional contrast. I like to add the darker colors to the inner corners of my petals and to the curved areas of the petals where you have leaves or petals in the background. And if you add a little bit of your darker color or shading to these areas, it's just going to give your image a little bit more depth, and it's going to give you that faux dimension while still being a one layer card. So here you can see I'm going back to add my shading, and you can see exactly where I place that color. So after I drop in the indigo, I'm going to just blend it out a little bit with a second clean brush, and I'm going to do this for all of the blooms in my panel today. There's no right or wrong way to do this. This is just some simple, easy, messy watercoloring. Just pick two colors that you like the best, and you want to choose two colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. So purple and blue are next to each other. If you like red and orange or orange and yellow, all these colors will blend beautifully into each other. So you can experiment with your colors. I chose to go with a non-traditional Christmas color palette for this card, but you can go with your traditional colors. You can go for your reds and oranges and yellows if you want to. But for today, I chose my blue and purple, and they blend really beautifully into each other. As I paint, you can see that some of the color goes outside the lines, but again, not a problem. Just blend that color out so that you can't really see the harsh edges. As long as you have a nice aura of color surrounding your clusters, you're good. If you wanted to take this project to the next level, you can add a third or fourth color to that aura surrounding your clusters to give your images a little bit more of a pop of color. But I didn't choose to do that. You can if you want, but I chose to keep it a little bit more simple. So once I was satisfied with all the watercoloring, I waited for my panel to dry completely, and then I stamped my sentiment in our Noir black ink. And you don't see me, but I did double stamp it just to make sure I got a nice crisp clean impression. Once my sentiment was on there, I trimmed my panel to be slightly narrower than an A2 size panel. A2 is 4¼ by 5½, so I cut it to that size, and then I trimmed the side edges a little bit more. Then I mounted that watercolored panel onto a piece of black cardstock, and since that watercolor panel is narrower than the A2, you could see the black cardstock behind the panel. Then I just added that to a side folding A2 card base, and my card is now complete. I hope you all enjoyed today's card and video. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel because I update it on a weekly basis. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.